The violent inclusiveness of socialism, diversity, inclusion, and equity or die methodology won't leave you alive. Socialism is the most violent cult the world has ever seen. Nobody, and I truly mean nobody, can come anywhere near the death toll of socialists in the 20th century. 100 million is an underestimate that often does not include Africa, where most countries attempted socialism, resulting in the mass starvation and murder of tens of millions more. The supporters of this ideology continue to push a narrative that everyone can be part of the same group, and that everyone can achieve the same levels of equity, but this is never the case. Communism and fascism are both derivates of the Marxist ideology and they are both nearly exactly the same. A socialist or communist might hate you because you think differently, and a fascist might hate you because you look different, but they are still full of hate and vitriol. In case you still don't believe me, let's look at the etymology or word origin of the word fascist. While fascio literally means bundle, it is also a word Italians used for trade union. This means both the socialists and the fascists' claims to be for the workers. Besides that, Benito Mussolini was a huge Marxist, as was Hitler, at least up through the 1910s. Hitler later traded Marxist class consciousness for racial consciousness, but the ideas are highly correlated. Socialism rebranded. As we've learned from James Lindsay's New Discourses website and podcast, equity and critical theory are simply Marxist concepts rebranded for the 21st century. Lindsay has a couple of great books out on this topic like Race Marxism and Marxification of Education. I wish he had explored the similarity between the racial consciousness efforts of critical race theorists to that of the Nazis a bit more, but you do tend to lose people when you start comparing things to Hitler. People have heard it claimed so many times that it has unfortunately lost its punch. Anyways, here's a bit more on the divisive concept of inclusion. Inclusion, in a critical social justice sense, refers to something subtly different that extends that idea in a particular way. It means to create a welcoming environment specifically for groups considered marginalized, and this entails the exclusion of anything that could feel unwelcoming to any identity groups. This is a key topic. The CRT and DI methodology supporters are far more exclusive than inclusive. The thing the far left doesn't understand is that they are as much ideological purists as the Nazis are racial purists. Ideological purity was more common in the Soviet Union and Mao's China. This is always bad, regardless of what flavor you put on it. It starts in one country, then shit just gets worse. Lindsay continues, inclusion is an expansive concept that could apply to silencing certain ideas like conservatism, meritocracy, or support for freedom of speech, usually in the name of safety and preventing the trauma or violence that such ideas could inflict upon progressives who see them as ideologies that perpetuate systemic harm. It could be used to prevent specific terminology like ladies and gentlemen, see also, man, woman, and binary, which theory insists carries an unjust assumption that everybody is one or the other, which is thus not inclusive to gender minorities like queer, gender fluid, gender nonconforming, or trans people. It could be applied to exclude certain symbols like MAGA hats, which are theorized to support systemic racism, systemic sexism, misogyny, heteronormativity, and so on, or specific sounds like clapping, which can trigger people with PTSD under a rubric of ableism. In all cases, either the safety, mostly, but not always only, psychological, see also, violence, of the people involved in the space or their right to have a space free from oppression is cited as the reason for the exclusive limitations done in the name of inclusion. This is interesting given that the Soviets also had a history of putting marginalized groups, like criminals, in charge of work camps. The idea is that they have some critical, class-conscious, knowledge that will make them superior leaders of men, especially men who they believe are guilty of thought crime. Capitalist equality of opportunity versus socialist equity. Free market capitalism is often seen as supporting the principle of equality of opportunity, while socialism is associated with the failed ideology of equity. In a capitalist system, individuals have the freedom to pursue their own interests and ambitions, and success is determined by merit and hard work. This creates a level playing field where everyone has the opportunity to succeed, regardless of their background or circumstances. In contrast, the socialist ideal of equity seeks to create equality of outcome, regardless of individual effort or merit. This can lead to a disincentive for hard work and innovation, as success is not determined by one's own efforts but rather by government policies and redistribution. Additionally, the implementation of policies aimed at achieving equity can often result in unintended consequences, such as reducing the overall wealth of society and creating a culture of dependence on the state. As such, many argue that the focus on equity in socialism undermines the principles of equality of opportunity and individual responsibility that are key to a thriving society. In reality, the socialists are always focused on ideological purity, and the only equity that is ever achieved is millions of people placed 6 feet under. This is the only equity socialists have ever managed to achieve beyond making everyone wear the same pajamas or have the same stupid haircut. Christianity explicitly rejects socialism. Christian belief and socialist ideology are often seen as incompatible due to their differing views on property ownership, wealth distribution, and government intervention. Christians believe that private property is a God-given right and is essential for individual freedom. In contrast, socialist ideology calls for the collective ownership of property and resources, with the goal of creating a more equal society. Christians also believe in the principle of individual responsibility, including the responsibility to care for oneself and one's family. This stands in opposition to the socialist concept of collective responsibility and the belief that the government should provide for the basic needs of its citizens. Additionally, Christian teachings emphasizes the importance of charity and voluntary giving, while socialist ideology advocates for compulsory redistribution of wealth. These fundamental differences make it difficult to reconcile the two ideologies. Charity versus forced coercion. The differences between Christian views on charity and the socialist belief in forced coercion can be seen as a matter of the heart versus the state. Christians believe that charity and generosity should be motivated by a desire to serve others and help those in need, and that it should be given freely and voluntarily. This is based on the teachings of Jesus and the example he set in his own life, as well as the principles of love, compassion, and selflessness. On the other hand, socialists believe that wealth redistribution should be achieved through coercion, often in the form of progressive taxation and other government policies. This is based on the belief that wealth inequality is a systemic problem that can only be solved through government intervention, and that the wealthy have an obligation to support the less fortunate. The Christian view emphasizes the importance of personal responsibility and the power of individuals to make a positive difference in the world, while the socialist view places the responsibility on the state and sees individuals as passive recipients of government largesse. Conclusion. This is why no one should support inclusion, because it is a misnomer that actually means exclusion, hate, and division. As libertarians and conservatives, we should support voluntary action over forced coercion. Let me know what you think in the comments.